Welcome to On Texas Football, a little Thanksgiving edition of Texas versus the SEC. I'm CJ Vogel, joined by Gerry Hamilton. As always, this episode of Texas versus the SEC brought to you by MyBookie. Get in the game with the code On Texas for MyBookie. Gerry, we're a week away from National Signing Day, which means Texas will be wrapping up its 2025 class as year one of members in the SEC. A lot to dissect right now, kind of take a look at where Texas sits in the national rankings, where Texas sits in the SEC rankings, as well as some schools in the SEC who we can expect to maintain a level of competitiveness in recruiting moving forward, as well as some schools that maybe are putting together a really solid class at the moment. But real quick, Gerry, year one for the Longhorns in the SEC, sitting right now with 24 commits in the class, a top 5, top 3 class at the moment. You could certainly argue that, there might be some vertical ascension as well coming. Is this what you expect for the Texas Longhorns moving forward as members of the SEC?
Yes, absolutely, I do. And they've had a little more success in Georgia this year than I thought they would so far. So add in that success, and I think they're, added on to where I thought Texas would be. And so that means they've ascended a little bit, man, from where I thought they'd be. I mean, I expect them to sign a top 5 class. We've been on that train the whole time. How many articles have been written on ontexasfootball.com talking about that possibility? But I do think the continued success in Florida with the possibility of a strong close in the Sunshine State, getting the feet in the door, and I say feet because it's Tashard Choice and Kenny Baker there now in the state of Georgia. I think that has taken Texas to new heights as far as recruiting in the SEC and especially in the Southeast region.
Of course, a lot to go through with the class rankings. We'll get to that here in a minute, Gerry, but real quick, a quick word from MyBookie, the sponsor for this weekend's edition of Texas versus the SEC.
This is the best MyBookie read I could give. I bet on Texas having a top 3 class. Maybe I bet even on number 2 right now. But look, this episode is brought to you by the folks at MyBookie. Make sure you're in the game with MyBookie. Play any matchup, hundreds of college player props, and much, much more. The best part is you can do it all anytime, anywhere, straight from your phone. Visit mybookie.ag and use promo code ONTEXAS to get started. It's MyBookie's 10th year anniversary, and they're rolling out the red carpet for bettors like a recruiting visit. Bet big and bet confident with risk-free Thursdays. If your boosted bet doesn't hit, you'll get that money right back. Weekly no sweat, win-win bets all season long. And sign up now using my On Texas all caps to cash in on a double deposit bonus. It's a no-brainer. Double the cash in your account before you ever place your first bet. But do not wait because it's for a limited time only. For those of you who've been playing with MyBookie, they've got something for you too, a brand new loyalty rewards program in MyBookie Plus, all caps there, plus all caps. It's simple. The more you play, the more you earn. And as you progress through the tiers, unlock exclusive promotions, epic giveaways, and cash back in your account. Again, visit mybookie.ag.
Perfect. Thank you, Gerry. And thank you again, MyBookie, for sponsoring Texas versus the SEC. All right. I wanted to pull up the rankings right now, the national rankings for the 2025 class. Of course, 6-7 days away from National Signing Day. You see it there, Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State. That feels like what we've seen over the last 5-10 years in terms of consistency at the top. Texas in there at 4, but Auburn making a surprise there, right behind the Longhorns in terms of the class rankings. Maybe a bit of a surprise, but Gerry, I feel like that's a school that will always be competitive in the world of recruiting with the way that things are shaking out at the moment.
Yeah, they can be very competitive in NIL, hyper competitive when they're motivated, which they are right now, trying to get the program back. Not ask you to scroll down, but to Tennessee, there you go, Tennessee 7th. So again, that means 6 of the top 7 are SEC schools right now. Only Ohio State is one of those 7. And then you have A&M at 11. You have A&M in Oklahoma, 14, representing the SEC, which we'll talk about in a second. But when you get into those top classes, top few classes, Ole Miss 16, so SEC litters the top 25 of these class rankings. There's 5 teams legitimately they have a chance to finish number 1. But I'm kind of throwing Ohio State out. I think they have to hold on the 5-star Naeem Offord and keep him away from Auburn. But then they have a couple of 4-stars that they could add to the class. But I don't think they're one that has a chance to finish number 1. I think your other 4 do, however. And I even think Alabama may be a long shot. I really think Georgia is the odds-on favorite to finish number 1. If they went out for Justice Terry, I believe they'll finish 1. Texas has the longest runway left here. They have 6 guys on the board that are all 4-star prospects. A couple of those guys are 5-star prospects. Going to kind of wait and see what happens with Justice Terry, Michael Fasusi. But you could point to 3 guys I think Texas is in a pretty good spot with right now. Michael Terry, Javion Hilson, and Kellen Wiley. If they just hit those 3, they're going to be staring at number 2 and may even push Georgia for number 1, even if Georgia gets Justice Terry. So there's that. Then Auburn is your sleeper team for the number 1 class. If Auburn got Naeem Offord, in-state 5-star, to flip from Ohio State, and they won out for 5-star Justice Terry, Auburn has a chance to finish number 1 as well. So I think there's 3 teams with a chance to finish 1, unless Alabama gets somebody I'm not giving them credit for right now. Georgia, Texas, Auburn. If I had to say, here's the percentage chances that you're going to finish 1, Georgia has the highest, Texas is 2, Auburn's 3, Alabama's 4, and Ohio State's 5 out of those top 5. And one prospect could really be the final piece for one of these programs. And it's crazy it could come down to the decision of one prospect. But Justice Terry out of Manchester, Georgia, the 5-star defensive lineman, is down to Georgia, Texas, and Auburn. I mean, Alabama's on the list, but I think that would be a surprise. I think in Austin, they consider Georgia the team to beat and the competition for the Horns. His recruitment may very well end up with the number 1 class because he's a 5-star left that's considering 3 of those top 5.
Yeah, a guy that will certainly move the needle there as well. I wanted to ask you this because you look at the top 4, really the top 6 in terms of the 5 stars in the class. And of course, this is the 24/7 rankings. The composite rankings might have a little bit different, but you see 5 at Georgia, 4 at Alabama, Texas with 4, Ohio State with 3. It feels like that's kind of the way that recruiting will move forward. Is there a school in the SEC right now, Jerry, that maybe we're not seeing on that first list? You know, maybe a Tennessee that could certainly put a thorn in the rest of the conference in terms of accumulating a class full of 5 stars?
I just don't see it. I really don't right now. I think Auburn's in on 2 5-stars. Texas is in on a couple of 5 stars. Georgia has obviously Terry in-state as a 5-star prospect. I think this is where it's at right now. I think those schools, I don't think there's another SEC school. Now, the school that could rise up into the top 6, 7 would be Texas A&M. If Texas A&M won out for Michael Fasusi, that'd be a 5-star. What if they flip Nick Townsend from Texas? I'm not saying it's going to happen. I think Nick Townsend's pretty solid to Texas, but he's still going to go to the A&M game Saturday. What if A&M closed strong late with a Fasusi and Nick Townsend? Well, suddenly they jump up into that 5, 6, 7 area code. So potentially, maybe that might not even get them there. But I don't think there's really a sleeper. I think this stuff is pretty much locked in right now with your top 5, and they're just going to be jockeying for position to see where that top 5 finishes.
Yeah, of course. I wanted to go through a couple classes, if that's all right with you. We'll start with Georgia because very star heavy at the top, as you would expect. You look at Elijah Griffin, Isaiah Gibson, really talented on the defensive line. Georgia has always been able to accumulate defensive line talent. 2025 cycle is no different. What do you like about the Dogs class so far, and what's to be expected moving forward with them?
Best D-line class in the country. If they add Justice Terry, that's scary. I actually think they'll add 2 more D linemen in this class, or edge D linemen. They just got Chase Littleton recently. I mean, that is a D-line and edge class that people would make even Kirby Smart blush. That is a great class. Tight end from Camden County is elite big athlete. They've got more size, large humans on the offensive line. Watch out for Osama Nkrumah, the running back out of Lee County. Long term, I think he's really good. They flipped CJ Wiley from Miami. So I think they're on the right track. Jonte Gilbert, really good at safety. They got multiple tight ends in that class. They've got offensive line and numbers in that class. So I really like what they've done, but you hit it. Defensive line and linebacker are highly elite in the Georgia class and going to get better on signing day, more than likely.
We've seen Texas start to recruit in the state of Georgia more and more this year. Is that a sustainable mission for the Longhorns each cycle, or is it, hey, hit or miss, depending on what the product on the field looks like? That's how it'll dictate your success.
I think Texas can have success in Georgia because, look, Georgia Tech has done better about hitting on 3 or 4 key in-state guys that were legitimately high-end SEC prospects, but they're going to have a hard time doing that consistently, I think. Not that they won't get a guy or 2 every year, but maybe not 3, 4, 5 in a class. They might. But even with that said, as much as Georgia recruits nationally, I mean, it's a loaded state. Just in the Atlanta metro area is loaded. It may be the most talented area in the country going right now. Then South Georgia is really good. Savannah has a lot of good players, man, that area. Brunswick. So if you can go in, Kenny Baker has more time, right? So now him and Tashard Choice can work together in that state a little bit more. The more time Texas has to evaluate that class, that next cycle of kids, and know who they can really get in on and have a good shot with, I think Texas can pluck 2 or 3 kids from Georgia every year, especially if they continue to win, especially, CJ, if they get to the SEC championship game and just continue to play those big games because they're playing at Georgia next year. They've been ranked in the top 10 all season. I think Texas can have success in Georgia because, look, a lot of other teams have had success. Clemson has had a lot of success in Georgia. Tennessee over the years, tons of success. Now they're closer. They're a 2-hour, 3-hour drive from home, but Clemson's not in the SEC. Texas is in the SEC. I think with 2 coaches working that state now, you could get 2 or 3 kids a year.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see just how much more of an impact Texas has. Of course, playing in SEC territory on the road, that's going to play a bit of a factor. I remember Nebraska being able to pull so many Texas kids because, hey, a lot of their games at Fort Worth, Lubbock, down in Norman, Waco, Austin. That means something for Texas to go to Gainesville, to have a foothold there, to go there once every 2 years. That plays a little bit more into their hands, in my eyes, of going into SEC territory, quote unquote, and garnering some recruits. But the other class I wanted to mention, the one also in the SEC, currently rated above the Longhorns, is Alabama. Kalen DeBoer, year 1. You see Keelan Russell up there at the top. I know Texas fans, that might be a sore subject, but you got yourself a pretty talented quarterback as well. Ty Haywood, Dijon Lee, a couple other names familiar with the Texas Longhorns. What do you think about Kalen DeBoer and his sustainability recruiting at the top of the country at Alabama?
Well, I think him and Courtney Morgan as the GM does a great job. I think they have a staff built to recruit in the SEC, and it's Alabama. They're going to recruit at a high level. I'm telling you, one of the best senior huddle watches, Michael Carroll, the 5-star offensive lineman committed to Bama. If you want to have some fun, turn on his huddle. He is a man amongst boys. Dijon Lee out of Mission Viejo. Look, that's Kalen DeBoer, Courtney Morgan being at Washington, right? I mean, that is one of the top corners in the country, 5-star kid. They've recruited all the right states. I mean, look, Ivan Taylor out of Florida. They've hit Texas. They've hit California. They've hit Florida. They've hit IMG. So if you just keep scrolling down that list, they've hit all the right states for that sustainability. So I really like what they're doing with this class. Multiple guys in California. You know, you're going to pick one off. The tight end, Caleb Edwards, who Texas loved and would have taken. But, you're going to hit a couple of guys in Georgia every year. You're going to if you hit a couple of guys in California, they have the correct recruiting geography to sign top 5 classes in their plan, I should say, more than geography, the plan to sign top 5 classes. And look, I'll be surprised if they're not up there around the top 5 4 out of every 5 years.
I would agree as well. It is, after all, still Alabama. But to that point, Texas wasn't the only team making the rounds in their first year in the SEC. And I wanted to talk about Oklahoma, not specifically just their class, because, I think they sit right now on number 14, Texas A&M number 13 in the class rankings at the moment. Top 15, you can win games at top 15. It won't necessarily compute to national championships in my eyes, but there are some talented pieces in each class. I'll start with you in Oklahoma.
Yeah. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, with Texas and A&M now being the 2 front runners in the state of Texas, where Oklahoma gets a lot of their talent up, especially up from DFW, are they just kind of locked out of this top talent that maybe used to look at the Sooners a little differently?
If I'm an Oklahoma Sooners recruiting junkie, I'm a little concerned because A&M is in year 1 under Elko. Sark is looking like a sustained top 10 type of program. That makes, and you struggle. Now you got the big win over Alabama, but still you're looking at 6-6 or 7-5, right? In year 3 under Venables. And they're really squeezed in Texas because all the years Oklahoma is, recently has been a power. They haven't had to face Texas and A&M both good at the same time. And LSU is always going to recruit well in Houston, right? Now your Georgia's recruiting Texas a little bit, Alabama, and along with your Ohio States and Notre Dame. So you already had enough competition. And now that Texas and Texas A&M are both winning with powerful NIL and powerful brands, man, Oklahoma's got a tough task. They have to be more of a national recruiting program. and where being a national recruiting program is difficult is if you stumble your toe on the field.
Yeah.
You have to win at a high level. You just do. I mean, there's very few Oregons where they could have a 4-loss, 5-loss season, but their brand's been so strong with kids for so long that kids are intrigued by the uniforms and Nike and Phil Knight and everything that goes along with Oregon. Oklahoma's in a tough spot. Again, A&M and Texas being good at the same time, CJ, puts a lot of pressure on Oklahoma in recruiting.
Of course, they got to figure it out with their coaching staff as well, which is undergoing some changes. You might look at a completely new offensive coaching change, a couple position coaches. Who knows what that future will look like for Brent Venables? Of course, he said he got it wrong, which means he can't do that again if he wants to be at Oklahoma very long. Point being, Oklahoma's got to figure that out, which means, to your point, Jerry, national recruiting takes a hit, especially out in the West Coast where we saw Oklahoma have a really, really strong foothold under Lincoln Riley. Maybe not so much anymore, but moving back to the in-state, because it's going to feel like a Texas A&M battle for a lot of kids moving forward. We've seen it in years past, but now that you see each of them on an equal footing, you see both of them top 15 in the country. Is it to the point where it's both can still go out of state and get some guys, but for the most part, a lot of these battles in state in the region are going to come down to the two schools in state in the SEC?
It's definitely more possible now because we haven't had the game yet, right? Wait until we're 2 years into the game, once at A&M and once at Texas. It's definitely going to drive staying home a little bit more. Now, I think one of the surprises to me in this 2025 recruiting cycle, period, is A&M in California. You know, everybody figured, oh, Johnny Nansen comes to Texas, Sark, Johnny Nansen, Chris Jackson with the modern day, Jeff Banks is recruited out in Arizona and Cali. Texas is built to go out and recruit really well in California, and they have. But A&M has kind of surprised me in California and along the West Coast. 2026 quarterback from Salt Lake City is a stud too. I mean, what they've done in 2025 on the West Coast in California has been very impressive. If you're just a novice recruiting fan, you may not think about it in those terms, but this is the best A&M's ever recruited California. And that's something to kind of put away in the back of your mind to see if they do that 2 and 3 classes in a row. But I do think coming into this state of Texas is going to get harder for every program. And there's so many players. Some of these kids aren't from Texas anymore, right? They moved in, so they don't grow up with A&M and Texas jerseys on. But it is going to get more difficult if A&M and Texas keep winning to get kids from the home state, because it creates the rivalry between the schools that carries over from the field to recruiting to the high school locker rooms to the practice fields. And it gets a little bit of a draw line in the sand type of thing in recruiting. And that plays really well.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, getting that game back, that's going to have some fun implications. You can imagine there's going to be a ton of recruits in College Station, and next year when Texas hosts that game, that might be the premier game in all the state to go to Thanksgiving weekend as well. So a lot of shifts and changes very much depending upon success in that game and whether or not you're the home team moving forward for the next 2 years in recruiting. Jerry, I got one last question for you, but before we get there, a quick final word about MyBookie, the sponsor of Texas versus the SEC.
Yeah, this episode is brought to of On Texas Football is brought to you by the folks at MyBookie. Make sure you're in the game with MyBookie, play any matchups, hundreds of college player props, and more. Go visit mybookie.ag and use promo code ONTEXAS to get started. The best part is you can do it all, anytime, anywhere, straight from your phone.
Perfect. Thank you, Jerry, and thank you, MyBookie, for sponsoring Texas versus the SEC. All right, Jerry, we'll get out of here after this question. Kind of a two-parter, but first, who could be a sneaky team in the SEC moving forward the next 5 years? Is there a way that maybe Florida sees a resurgence under DJ Lagway? Maybe, I don't know if Arkansas will ever find a piece to have a consistent foothold in the state of Texas unless Pittman figures it out. Or LSU. I feel like LSU is a team, especially in the Houston area. Yeah. Texas and LSU and A&M fight for the same type of defensive backs, defensive linemen, skill players all over the place. Who are you looking at in the next 5 years of SEC recruiting now that is going to pose as a pretty tall task for the Longhorns to overcome?
And this is outside of the knowns, the Georgia, Texas, Alabama, Auburn. I would throw LSU and Tennessee into that, and then A&M. It's Florida, because, look, Florida is a powerful university if they start winning games. I'm not saying it's Texas, but it's not far off now. I mean, they've won 2 national titles in basketball. They've won multiple national titles and 3 since '96, right, in football, and they had the back-to-back in basketball. And they're a tremendous university all around athletically. They're in the Sunshine State where there is tons of talent. You can also go recruit Georgia, Eastern Seaboard. I mean, and Florida's got a national brand. So they're number one. But the sleeper is almost South Carolina. It could recruit well enough to have some multiple 8-9 win seasons and get in a hunt for a playoff spot more than just this year. They have a young team. They have a fun quarterback to watch. So does Florida, by the way. They have a young, fun quarterback to watch. They have a defense that sacks the quarterback, that hits people really hard. And here's the thing. Virginia Tech are not ascending as programs. North Carolina, coaching change. NC State, step back this year. Wake Forest, if they hit their peak with Dave Clawson going down due to NIL. There are some really good opportunities for South Carolina. And I mean, Dylan Stewart, the freshman's from Washington, D.C. And Maryland, again, hasn't taken steps. So all the programs they're battling in their neighboring states to the north have not taken steps on the field while South Carolina has. And all it takes is getting – and there's not going to be many Dylan Stewarts, but the poor man's Dylan Stewart out of D.C. the next time, who's an NFL player, right? 3 or 4 guys out of Virginia, maybe 2 or 3 more guys out of Carolina. Then you can drift south to Florida and recruit in Florida a little bit more if you want. You're always going to recruit some in Georgia. They're actually in a really nice pocket area to recruit in, as long as the Carolina schools and the Virginia colleges aren't up all at the same time. And right now, they're definitely not up at the same time.
That's really interesting. I like that DMV kind of shout out, because guess what? Nick Harbor, one of their star wide receivers, exactly from there. So you've seen them win high-profile recruitments before, and to your point, if they continue to build on what looks to be maybe a 8-4, 9-3 season, maybe a snub from the playoffs, or maybe even they catch the back end of it, that's some real momentum for them. Jerry, real quick, we'll end it with this. Over the next 3 years, is Texas the number 1 recruiting team in the SEC?
I think they're number 2. I think Georgia's going to be number 1 as long as Kirby's there, unless there's a big fall, because they have less. I mean, they have potent teams coming in their state, but they only in-state, all they battle is Georgia Tech. And they're such a brand. And they are sitting in, I think it's the best recruiting job in college sports. Because you have Atlanta, an hour away, hour and a half away in traffic. You have South Georgia. You have the Sunshine State directly due south of you. You have Alabama, who has big, fast, physical football players to the west, directly to the west. You have the Carolinas, who per capita put out a lot of NFL guys. And you have a national brand. I mean, so they have the least competition in-state for top prospects. They have great states right around them. I mean, you look at Texas. If Texas has to go east, if you go west, you're going to New Mexico, or north, you're going to Oklahoma and Colorado. It's just not the same. Georgia's in a great, great spot, and it's got a great college town. They have great facilities, and they've won 2 national titles. And barring a major upset tomorrow, they're going to be in the playoff again. So, I mean, it's like they're locked in to probably being the top recruiting program in the SEC. But I do think Texas is going to be number 2.
You can win championships at number 2. As long as you continue to stack, and Texas has done a good job of building and getting to that point, obviously, with the hopes of back-to-back playoff appearances. You got Arch Manning coming up. You'll see what that will do to the Texas brand as well. But that will do it for today in Texas versus the SEC. For Gerry Hamilton, I'm CJ Vogel, and this has been On Texas Football. You'll have a great Thanksgiving afternoon. Welcome.